In today's video, we're taking up the latest trade talk from around the league. We're looking at Horvat in Vancouver. A new team has emerged according to the Sportsnet that may have interest, and that's the Montreal Canadiens. We're also taking a look at some trade talk involving the Edmonton Oilers as well as the New Jersey Devils. We have a fine from NHL player safety, a signing in Ottawa, and some other injuries and other updates from around the league. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and some trade rumors to take a look at here today. Before we jump into the news, I just want to remind everybody, I announced yesterday that all the Top Shelf Hockey merchandise in the merch store that you see down below the video here, it's all available at 25% off for the next, I guess it'll be 6 days now. We started yesterday for a week for a holiday sale. The promo code is TOPSHELF25, so TOP SHELF25. If you want to grab a Top Shelf Hockey hoodie, t-shirt, or any other merch with a discounted price, now is the time to do so. We may run some other promotions into early in the new year, but I'm not sure exactly what we're going to have available just yet. Also, before we jump into the news, there's some sad news that it's not really connected directly to the NHL, but it does affect and directly impact an NHL player. Some of you may have heard, especially if you live in Ontario, and if you live in the U.S., you may not have heard of this story, but unfortunately in Vaughan, Ontario, there was a mass shooting. It's not something that we see commonly in Canada, but it does happen from time to time. Unfortunately, 5 people were murdered in a condo building. Essentially, one of the condo building residents went on a bit of a rampage with a gun. The shooter had issues apparently with the condo board. There were some issues that I don't know the full extent of everything, but it sounded like the board, the condo board, was trying to take the resident to court to force him to sell the condo because of issues and concerns around threats and harassment. The full context and details, I don't know. But unfortunately, he went on a rampage. And it sounded like, from the articles I've read, that he may have been targeting condo board members. I believe some of the people that were killed were on the board, but I believe there might have been some that weren't. I'm not completely sure on that, but that's kind of the context of what spawned the event to happen. But unfortunately, one of the ones that were killed was the grandfather of Maple Leaf defenseman Victor Mete. So Victor Mete, of course, an Ontario born and raised player, obviously suffering from this loss. It's tough enough to lose a parent, grandparent, anybody close to your family like that, but especially under those circumstances, I'm sure it makes it that much more tragic and tougher to deal with. So we certainly want to extend our condolences to Victor Mete and his family, as well as all the other friends and family of the people that were impacted and lost their lives in this senseless act a few days ago. So I just want to acknowledge that, and certainly see what unfortunately way too many of these types of things happen, not only in Canada but across the US and other places in the world, and I just would really like to see that come to an end, but it's not, and unfortunately it's become way too common in life today. Now, onto the news. We're going to take a look at a situation and a couple things that happened last night in the Toronto and Tampa Bay Lightning game. Last night, the Leafs actually had a fairly dominant win over the Lightning. The Leafs dominated, fair to say, the first 2 periods. I think it's fair to say the Lightning were the better team in the third, but still the Leafs walk away with the victory. And overall, I think a fairly convincing victory at that, so good on them for that. But Mikhail Sergachev of the Lightning walks away with a $5,000 slashing fine for slashing Leaf forward Michael Bunting. At the end of the second period, though, there was also an incident where Michael Bunting was defending Mitch Marner. Mitch Marner took a hit, which appeared to be like from behind. It was not a great-looking hit by any means. Bunting, of course, we know, is not afraid to mix it up and get in there to defend his teammates. The period and the clock had expired, so they were trying to get players off the ice. And linesman Dan Kelly was trying to separate Bunting from the pack and get him off. And eventually he grabbed him and kind of shoved him off the ice once they got near the door. So I know a lot of people today are talking about maybe something should be done about Dan Kelly as an official. Should he put his hands on the players like that? Did he get, a little overzealous, a little too rough with Bunting? Dan Kelly himself is a former NHL player and a guy who's not afraid when he played, afraid of the rough stuff. Like, he was known to be a fighter and like a tough customer. So I think maybe a little bit of the player might have been coming out there just where he's, probably has such a long, history and habits of grabbing players like that in the heat of the moment. So I don't know that it really should be all that big a deal. To some degree, I think he probably did, fair to say, that he crossed the line. And I think he got a little too rough with Bunting. I can imagine, though, if Bunting did that to him, it would be a completely different story. And the player would be in a lot of hot water. So I think players and officials should be treating each other with equal respect. And yes, they sometimes need to grab each other, like the referees and linesmen, to separate them during a scrum or anything at the end of the period. I get that, but it wasn't so much that. It's just the way how he shoved him off the ice that I thought was a bit too far. Personally, I know there's some people out there calling for Kelly to be reprimanded, suspended, kicked out of the league. I think that's a bit much, in my opinion. I think he's still a reasonably new official. I think he's only been in there for a couple of years. So I think, to me, it's a conversation, I think, between he and his supervisors, and they probably should tell him to maybe watch that a little bit. But to me, that's as far as it should go. But it's certainly not a situation you see very often at all, and I'd be curious to see if the league does comment on it any further, if we'll hear anything on Kelly, but I'm guessing probably not. Dallas Stars forward Denis Gurianov. Another situation where we don't know the full details here, of course, because it's private and personal, but he has taken an indefinite leave of absence from the Stars due to family reasons. So, of course, like I said, because we don't know, we have no clue how long he's going to be out, neither does the team. But again, just want to extend our thoughts with Gurianov. Whatever he's dealing with, I hope everything turns out okay, and certainly wish him, a quick recovery for him to get back to playing hockey, that whatever he's dealing with doesn't take too long, hopefully, to be resolved. Of course, big signing in Ottawa today. Early Christmas present for Sens fans and for Artem Zub. Sens fans, we know, are pretty hardcore Zub lovers. Zub is one of the, to me, a very underrated defenseman. I heard a lot of the national media between Sportsnet and even a little bit today are in the cars listening to Sirius XM's NHL Network Radio. And this, to me, I don't know that they really understand what Zub means to the Senators and their defense. He really just stabilizes things and keeps things, like low events from happening in the defensive zone. Like, just one of those guys. Like that, he was almost like when Mark Mathon came over to Ottawa a number of years ago to play with Erik Karlsson, just kind of settle things down and give you that extra stability back there. He kind of does the same sort of thing. You don't get a lot of offense out of him, and when he does score, they do tend to win. Like, it's one of those odd stats like sometimes you see. When he does score, the team usually ends up being a really big goal. But he gets a 4-year contract extension with an average annual value of $4.6 million. I personally think it's a great contract. I know there's a lot of Sens media and fans thought it might even be more than that, whereas a lot of the national media are commenting that maybe it's too much. I don't think it is. I think it's for a top 4 defenseman that's going to play 20 minutes a night, even if it's a more defensive specialist. Based on what defensemen are getting paid nowadays, I don't have any concerns or issues with that contract at all. He's still not that old. He's still in his 20s, and to me will secure and help solidify that back end. They still need another defender, but the fact that they're not losing Zub really enforces what they have there. This will eliminate them from trying to find 2 defenders in the off seasons or later this year, depending on whenever they make that move. Now, speaking of defenders, the Leafs are down another guy. Rasmus Sandin left last night's action injured, appeared to be a neck injury. Of course, TJ Brody's back now, but he had missed an extended time. We know Muzzin might be done for the year. Morgan Riley's out, been out for a long time. He's getting closer to returning. Jordy Ben's been out. Victor Mente's been out. There's a lot of guys been in and out. Like, that blue line's been beaten and battered for a lot of this year, and the fact that Sandin and Liljegren are getting a better, a bigger opportunity, you could say, more ice time with all the injuries, and to lose him is unfortunate for his own development and really unfortunate for the team. So we'll see how they deal with that, but they've so far managed the adversity well and have managed to keep an excellent record, even though their decor has been beaten and battered up. The Columbus Blue Jackets have added yet another injury to their long list of man games lost this year. It just seems like there's a curse over that team with injuries this year. But CBJ Chinakov now has a high ankle sprain. He's going to be up for about 6 weeks. So more bad news there in Columbus. And young defenseman, 25-year-old Brendan Guhle. I'm sure most of you know that name. He was a former fairly high draft pick. He was 51st overall in 2015 by the Sabres. Was in the Sabres organization for a number of years. Ended up going to Anaheim. I think it was a couple of years back. He's retired at the young age of 25. After playing in Anaheim, he played, I think, 40 games after being traded there. Didn't seem like there was going to be an NHL future for him, or at least not a consistent one. May have to play in the minors more. Decided to try going to Europe. He did that a little bit, and now he's calling it a career. So Brendan Guhle, the 51st overall pick from 2015, and limited amount of NHL action between the Sabres and Anaheim Ducks, is finished up with pro hockey. So certainly want to congratulate him on a brief career. We'll see what's next for him. I don't know if he'll be doing something else involved with the game of hockey or not, but certainly somebody who, when he was younger, I know did have a lot of potential, and a lot of teams were interested to see how he was going to develop. But Guhle is done much earlier than most of us thought. Into the trade section of the video, we got some teams I want to talk about, including the Oilers. We know the Oilers have had a hard time defending lately. Darnell Nurse is taking it in the media, as well as Evan Bouchard, and their lack of defensive strength, you could say, that their ability to defend has been poor at best, causing them to lose some games. Goaltending has been questionable. Skinner's been good for the most part. Campbell is not really, even the last game I remember I watched a couple nights ago, Campbell, I thought, wasn't great, but he was good. He wasn't phenomenal, but he was good. To me, good enough to win based on what the Oilers offense can put up, but they still found a way to lose. It's like those things like that need to change. And the Oilers are reportedly looking for help on defense, which is no surprise. We've been talking about it off and on for a while, but one of the names that the NHL insiders are talking about, mentioned on Insider Trading and mentioned again as well here by Elliotte Friedman in his latest 32 Thoughts column in Sportsnet.ca, was Gavrikov from Columbus. Now, of course, the Jackets, we know, are well out of it. Likely going to be a lottery team. One of the teams in contention for first overall. And Gavrikov, to me, makes sense. That could be a piece that a lot of teams are interested in. Now, Friedman goes on to say that one thing, though, that might be, I guess, to caution everybody that might be complicated to get done, is that based on what happened last year in the D market, like some D-men were generating some pretty big trade returns. Look at guys like Ben Sherratt, for example. The return that Montreal got for him was excellent when he was traded to Florida at the deadline. And, of course, D-men continued to get paid very well in the offseason. So it's not going to be cheap to add anybody who's a real solid defenseman, regardless of if they're a first pair, second pair, even if they're more defensive-minded compared to more offensive-minded. It's still, they're all expensive. So Gavrikov is of interest to the Oilers, and we'll see and monitor that situation and what they do. But they've also been linked to some degree to Jacob Chikrin in Arizona. I know some people feel like he should be the guy. His defensive metrics are actually pretty decent compared to the Oilers guys. He would be an upgrade compared to most of them. But again, the Coyotes are looking for a pretty penny, and it's not going to be cheap. So we'll see what the Oilers do. Teams are also watching the Devils and Damon Severson, according to Elliotte Friedman. Now, Severson's a player I talked about at the beginning of the season. I know a lot of Devils fans tried to tell me different, that he wouldn't be moved. And to be honest, looking at what they already have signed for their blue line, they have a lot of guys that are locked up longer term, and they have some really, high impact rookies, prospects coming up. Like you got Nemec and Luke Hughes. To me, I don't see a long-term future for Severson. I know he's been a good soldier there. He's played relatively well, but Severson to me long-term doesn't make sense for New Jersey. Even though they're projecting to be a playoff team. I mean, they had a remarkable run of victories, and of course, lately they've been on a losing streak, but it's 5 or 6 games. So they're suddenly coming back down to earth here, and we'll see if they can get things turned around. I think their odds of playoffs are still pretty good as long as this doesn't get out of control too long. So maybe they keep them as their own rental. We'll see. I don't know, but certainly Friedman reports that teams are watching the Devils and trying to see what they're going to do with Severson, because he is a UFA coming up here. So like I said, he's likely not coming back, and his ice time has been dropping. He's been playing some of the lowest ice times of his career. So like I said, it makes sense that they might want to part with him. But depending on where things go for the playoffs, wouldn't be shocking if they do kind of use them as their own rental. We'll see. Now, there's a Sportsnet article from Ryan Dixon talking about Bo Horvat. And there's also some comments from Nick Kyprios adding a couple of new teams into the mix here for the services of Bo Horvat in Vancouver. Of course, we know the captain is quite likely to get traded. No guarantees, of course. We saw the Canucks pull a shocker out and sign JT Miller last minute after weeks and months of speculation he would be traded. I don't think they can pull that off here with Horvat after that Miller signing, but crazier things have happened. But at this point, all indications point to a trade coming. Now, Kyprios says not to count out the Vegas Golden Knights. And I guess you never can. Right now they're dealing with an injury bug. And they've certainly suffered a few losses lately, but for the most part are having a good season. And Vegas is not afraid to be aggressive and make big moves. So we probably shouldn't count Vegas out, but it's difficult to say what their odds would be to grab the division rival there. But Ryan Dixon's article proposes a number of teams. There's a few other teams as well, but the one I found most interesting, because this team has not been previously linked, in my opinion, that I've seen from other NHL reporters or insiders, is the Montreal Canadiens. Why would they want Bo Horvat? Well, they propose a trade here of David Savard, which would help the Vancouver Canucks on the right side of the blue line. Also, it proposes including prospect Jaden Struble, as well as prospect Owen Beck, along with the first-round pick they picked up from Florida in the Ben Chiarot trade, and a third-round pick in 2024. That is a massive return for the Vancouver Canucks for Bo Horvat. Of course, at this rate, he's flying high, scoring tons of goals. Will he be able to keep it up through the next contract? I have my concerns for sure. I think Bo Horvat's a phenomenal player. I'd love to have him on my team if I was running an NHL team. I think a lot of teams feel that way. They really like Horvat and the strong effort and the good results he brings, but is he going to be a $9 to $10 million player consistently for the next 6, 7, 8 years? I have my doubts. I really do. I really think there's the real possibility and high risk of regression kicking in and him maybe being a more consistent, maybe 60-point player. 20 goals, maybe 25 with, maybe 30 assists, something like that. It's hard to say. I would just be careful. We see a lot of bad moves in unrestricted free agency. And to me, Montreal right now is not projected to be a playoff team. Now in Montreal, if you look down the middle, they have Nick Suzuki, who's certainly projected to be a pretty good number one center, so they don't have to worry too much there. They do have some other players that could be the long-term number 2 guy. It could be Kirby Dach. Dach's played a fair bit on the wing. Maybe he's better as a winger and he ends up being that longer term. I'm not sure. So it's possible they've been linked to Pierre-Luc Dubois in Winnipeg. A lot of people in Dubois' side of things have said publicly that he wants to be in Montreal and that he intends to go there when his contract is able to hit UFA status, which is another this year and one more year away. So, will Montreal target Dubois? I don't know. But at the same time, he's younger and possibly able to do the same or better offensively. I don't know if Horvat really makes a lot of sense for the Montreal Canadiens, in my opinion, especially to give up all those assets when they can possibly address a need in the offseason through free agency. But to give up Struble and Beck, Owen Beck is projected to be a heck of a prospect. I don't know that they're going to want to trade him. A 2023 first rounder, I realize it's Florida's first rounder, but as of today, Florida is not a guaranteed playoff team either. That pick could be reasonably high. I would be cautious in a deep draft and maybe wanting to hang on to that too. The third rounder in 2024, sure, that's fine. I wouldn't have any issues with them parting with Savard and Struble, but I don't know if that you take Beck out and a first rounder out and that's suddenly not such a good deal. Vancouver's not going to accept that, but to me, I just don't know that it makes a lot of sense for Montreal given where Horvat is in his career, just on a long-term deal. I don't know. To me, I understand that the trade package would be intriguing to Vancouver. I don't know if it would be considered an overpayment. It'd be an awfully sweet offer for Montreal, but it just doesn't make sense to me. So even though the Montreal Canadiens are suggested in this article, I don't see it happening. But if you're a Habs fan, especially, I want to hear from you. If Bo Horvat is available as trade from the Vancouver Canucks, do you take that offer? Or if you were interested in a player, would you not just wait and talk to him in free agency? That, to me, would make more sense for a team that has some cap issues and is still rebuilding and knows that it's likely a couple of years away from really pushing to be a stronger team in the Eastern Conference. So let me know your thoughts on that down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.